Yeah. Yeah, I understand. It was good. It was good. I'm trying to see the chat. I'm gonna put your source sheets on the chat right now. That's what they're doing. Yeah. If I make a mess here because it's dying. Yeah. Um, okay, where is?
Maybe I, do you mind if I move to like the middle?
However, as long as
Does that have to be plugged in, you think?
yeah, I don't know why it dies after one class. That's all it manages. But you can still move. Good move.
Did anybody combine on the Zoom?
Yeah. Elise came in.
How you doing? What? Oh, well, thank you. Well, I think yeah, yeah. Was not. But you would.
And now I have to do this. Okay. Here, my phone. Hi. You too. So nice that you came. They need a hug. Talk to you.
Was today a good day?
No, I have to be strong. I had it for 1 hour. She has been here. Who else been here as a kid? Combination of English and trying medicine. She's like, why am I a science experiment? Yeah, I want to be a science experiment. It's really hard at that age. And I always say to her, how do you feel? How does it make me feel? She's like, I don't know. I'm like, and, we analyze everything we take and how it makes us feel. And she's like, stop asking me. Or here's I just have to put this on and then I can. Oh, no, it's for Patsy. You look amazing. Great God. Give me one of those. Dave takes it as a secret, but I tell him if you didn't, you would be 50 pounds heavier. He would be. He denies it. Like, are you joking? You want to have gaining 10 pounds a year. And like, you don't realize it. He denies it. It's like, I don't even take expensive. I'm like, you don't have a gym membership all these years. This is what you need. And like, he's really not. He's yeah, I'd be keeping him from being like 25 months pregnant. But he was I know that's not why you went on it, but for him, he went on it because I couldn't look at his stomach because I needed. I was afraid about his you feel good? That's what keeps you is yeah. But then it's dampening your. Is it affecting your mood in a bad way? Bad. No. Okay, good. Yeah. But it could be what you're saying. Could be the medicines. Both can make you. These can be separate. My husband, he's like we're eating and we're like, why are we eating more than Abba? It's really what I messed up. Like, yeah, but some people it does great. I see some people can't stay on it. I'm happy you yeah.
But yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of
If I
stuff.
cared more, I'd probably make the effort to go get it. But I just, it had one problem. That's how I looked at it. I left trying to help me. But then I just said, be healthy enough, you know, running.
So I mean, I just feel like it is the same for like everything, and it's like figuring out what is actually fun. I mean, like you're saying, like the medication, it's like what is it? Like I have the crazy like sinus problems and
Now I need a tube. I need an implant. I can't get the then think I need a implant, like not to you, like my bone structure in my jaw. And I went to get a CT of the mouth, and they see the sinus. Oh, there you go. There's my sinus. I've been complaining about it. Nobody. So I go to the ENT. And the ENT is like, you need to do a CT of the sinus, and you might need to do a cleanup in order to do it. Now, do I really need it? So I really want to do sinus. My sinus are not with me that much, but I'm going to do no, I went to the guy. Oh, sorry. I went to the other guy. And they said go for PT. Starting with everybody. Let's start. Let's see how far this goes. All right. Let's see how far this takes us. Great. I'm sorry. Is this done? Sorry. I understand. Yes. How are you feeling? Is this your daughter? Hi. Unmute myself, and then also do on video. And how do we record? I think it's recording. It's already recording. So they'll figure it out. Hi, nice to see you. Okay, I'm sorry. Is this annoying? Here, let's see what. Let's try it without for a bit, and I can plug it back. Yeah, I know. I'm gonna keep an eye on. Okay. All right, everybody. I don't know if there's anybody here, but in the meantime, I will share my screen. Okay, we're recording. Hello, good morning, everybody. Woo. All right, everybody, let's start.
Danielle, is everybody in from the kitchen area?
Thank you.
How are you? Nice to see you. Ah. Nice to see you. None of the ship out. Is that possible? Out at the, I was losing my shit. Kids. You're talking about your son's kids. He really likes him. They have a good time together. And she said that he has a very good sense of humor. It's like sharp. Yeah, he is. Yes. Dry. Yes. Very dry. Yes. And she survived Rosh Hashanah. It was me. I went crazy because I was like, she doesn't have to do. And I was stressing out because I had just come home. I just come back from LA. So you just they did. Thank God. Thank God. Wow. It's over drinks or coffee. Okay, fine. It's that kind of story. Definitely not to be recorded. Oh, Elisa's here. Hi, Lisa. All right, we're gonna start. All right. Everything you say is being recorded. Hi, everybody. Good to see everybody. Oh, I know everybody's here. Okay, I was gonna say. Okay, great. So let me just see. I'm sharing my screen. Okay. Can I what? I can't. Well, the problem is I need to be near. Would you rather I sit over here? The head? Okay, I can sit over there. Yeah. Now I'm gonna try it over here. Yes. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Let me just grab my phone. Okay, so this is for those of you, everybody knows me. I'm Catriella, Cotty. This is the third year of In Search of Chazal, but they're standalone classes. So for the people who have been studying with me for 3 years now, or this is our third year together, we're gonna continue. But for those of you who are starting, no problem, because we destroyed the temple for you at the end of last year. So right. No, we're just in the Reformation years. So we're going to do a little destroying today just because it gives us some background for what we're trying to do. So let's just start from basics a little bit. Why is this class called In Search of Chazal? So Chazal means Chachamim Zichronam Livracha. Chachamim are the sages. It's the parlance by which we refer to the rabbis. There are lots of different ways that we refer to the rabbis, right? We say the rabbis, we say the rabbanim, the rabbis themselves and others in the Gemara refer to them as Prushim, right? The Pharisees, because at the time of the Second Temple, they were another sect. There were a lot of sects floating around. You've heard of the Essenes, you've heard of the early Christians. I don't say Christians because Christians, as we know them today, didn't come until much later. But towards the end of the Second Temple, we had early Christians floating around, and we had the Sadducees. What? That's right, neo-Jews. That's right, neo-Christians. We had Sadducees. The Sadducees were Tzedukim in Hebrew, which refers to the priestly class. So we had like a lot, towards the end of the Second Temple, we had a lot of different sects emerging, probably because as we all know that as time gets more dramatic and as and as things get more tumultuous, lots of people are turning to ways to kind of answer and sort of figure out how they should be proceeding with life in such dramatic times. I mean, we wouldn't know about that. We live in such calm, peaceful times, but at that time it was really tumultuous. Yeah, thank you. Perfect. Perfect. I'm not going unless they're Kabanos, but right, okay, there we go. And I do want to say this is a a tryout class. Next week are more tryout classes, but I won't be here next week. So you have to decide today whether you're taking the class or not. So decide now, and then that's it. You know. So I won't be here. I'll be out of town. So no. This is it for the tryout, and then we'll continue for the rest of the semester afterwards. Okay, so why do we call it? And so that's just to give you an idea. Really, from the point of the destruction of the Second Temple until today, we don't use the term Pharisees anymore. And when we say Pharisees, we're really referring to the early rabbis of the Second Temple period, but we still use Chazal, we still use Chachamim. We still talk about the rabbis today. I'm talking about and referring to the rabbinic period. Obviously, academics refer to the Pharisees, and we don't talk about the Sadducees anymore, the Tzedukim. We just call them the Kohanim, and they get to Duchen and on Shabbat, and every day. So that's where we're at, and the Christians are just the Christians. So why do we call this class In Search of Chazal? Oh, by the way, there was one more term. The rabbis themselves, and we'll see this more and more this semester, this year, the rabbis themselves, do you know what they called themselves? They called each other the chaverim, the friends. They weren't Quakers, but that was a special, they had, especially after the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, where we have a very interesting period of time. As you know, if you've been studying with me or if you've studied Gemara, probably, I hate to venture a number, but I would say more than half, at least 60% of discussion in the Gemara revolves around sacrifices, tuma, impurity, and Torah, purity, okay? Things that are not relevant for us today, but were very relevant for the rabbis of the Second Temple period and for the rabbis who eventually wrote down the Mishnah, which covers the second period, and then later the Gemara. The ideas of sacrifices and purity and impurity were of utmost on their mind. By the time we close the writing of the Mishnah in the year 200, it becomes very clear that there's not going to be a third Beit HaMikdash in that time period. And yet, for a good bad at math, for a good 130 years, let's say, more than 100 years after the destruction of the temple, we have evidence that the rabbis and many Jews continued to try to maintain their level of Torah, their level of purity. Okay. Why? Because they felt like there was going to be a rebuilding, right? And which made sense in terms of the numbers. The idea that 70 years would pass till another Beit HaMikdash was built is baked into the idea of the Bar Kokhba revolt as well, which we don't have to get into right now. But so Chaverim was a way that they talked about each other, which was a code word for people who kept a high level of Torah, a high level of purity, and still took that level of sanctity very much seriously in the things that they did. Obviously, no one was offering sacrifices or things like that because the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed. But that's just, you'll see that term. They will refer to the chaver or chaverim or the wife of the chaver. A lot of women were much more central to maintaining purity, and not because of nida. Part of it has to do with menstruation and the rules having to do with that, but it was the women who would identify other families that where they could trust that we're not talking about kashrut. We're not talking about whether the cake is kosher. It's really just a matter of whether the oven is pure or impure. And so we see that term floating around.
Can I just say that in the Iran that I grew up in London,
Monks.
The head of the Chevra Kadisha and other Gevirim that were recognized either because they were generous financially or they gave a lot of time to the Kehillah, they were referred to as Haver, and they were called up to the Torah as HaChaver.
Interesting. And if you think about it, the whole name Chevra Kadisha, it's a chavura, it's a chevra, it's a community of people who are maintaining this holiness. So there's a precedent for it, which comes from the opposite, which comes from, tuma, impurity. So it's a very interesting idea. So now let's get back to the name In Search of Chazal. Why is this class called In Search of Chazal? Because part of my inspiration for calling it In Search of is because you remember Leonard Nimoy in that show. But anyway, aside from that, and he had that Kohen thing. But aside from that, though, it's very hard to know. Like everything that we do, we're rabbinic Jews, whether we like it or not. Rabbinic Jews were the ones to survive the destruction of the Second Temple. Us and the early Christians, we're the ones who survived, right? So the Sadducees are gone, the Essenes are gone, and all the other sects that were kind of floating around in the Qumran area and all of that, they're not around anymore. Which I find it so funny when people say like, Reform Judaism is a form of Christianity or whatever, influenced by Christianity. Essentially, Reform Judaism, Conservative Judaism, Reconstructionist, Masorti, everybody is descended from Rabbinic Judaism. All the issues that Reform Jews have are a response to the fact that they are essentially descendants of Rabbinic Judaism. And because if you would think about it, like think about someone from this time period, like Second Temple time period, going into the future and thinking about the kinds of things that we argue about as Jews between denominations, and they'd be scratching their heads saying, well, why do you care? And we do very much care because this is the Judaism that we have. So in order to understand, like, this is who we are in our Judaism, you would think that the best thing to do to understand where we come from and who we are is to turn to the writings of Chazal, to turn to the writings of the rabbis. Except the rabbis put a lot of obstacles. And if you look in the Beit Midrash, we have so much to look to, right? Like there's so much to look at. We have Gemara, we have all of these 36 volumes of the Babylonian Talmud. We should be able to pour into it and understand who these rabbis were so that we can understand more about ourselves, right? To understand who we are. And yet it's very evasive, it's very elusive. Why is it so elusive? Because the rabbis put up a lot of obstacles in our way. And the first obstacle is define for me what Talmud is. Aside from the fact that it's rabbinic writing, what is it? What is the purpose of it? What is, and why, what are we supposed to glean from what's in the Talmud? And so there are a lot of ways you can answer this question, but the one thing it isn't, the one thing that you can say for sure the Talmud is not, is a history book. The rabbis were not interested in writing about history. We have little glimpses of things that we glom onto to try to understand something about the historical import of the time or how the rabbis were reacting to it, but they make it very difficult for us to get to the bottom of it. They make it very difficult because it wasn't of interest to them. They were not rabbinic. They were not. They did not see their purpose as rabbis, as historians. So what was their purpose? And I would argue, and part of what we're going to be doing this year is I'm a facilitator. I'm just like giving sources, and I'm more of a facilitator than a teacher. I'm not trying to say, like, obviously I have my opinions, and I like to buck popular opinion. So, I am pro Shammai. I'm not a big fan of Hillel. I'll put it right out there. I think Shammai gets short shrift. I'm not a big fan of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who we're going to be looking at today. I have, because I hate when something becomes like, this is like for for 2,000 years as diaspora Jews, these are the people that we hold on to. First of all, we have a new reality. And I think we have to reevaluate, since the rabbis were pretty quiet on a lot of different things. I think that we also have to reevaluate how those figures played in that time period. So we're really on a search. We're on a search, like what do we have to work with? So we have Gemara, and we're going to be using a lot of Talmud in this class. When we say Talmud, we mean the compilation of Mishnah, which is the earliest collection of rabbinic writings. And we have Gemara, which is the commentary on the Mishnah. Use the timeline as much as you can. It's very helpful. I'm really bad with dates, so if you ever get confused about it, you can keep going through there. But the irony of the whole thing is that when we're talking about early rabbis, and we say Mishnah as part of it's the recording of the Tannaitic period. Those are the early rabbis, which spans hundreds of years, because it doesn't actually get written down till the year 200, till around the year 200, which is way after the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash in 70. When we talk about early rabbinic writing, we're talking about something that came after all of those rabbis, because nothing was being written down at that time. So my sense from rabbinic writing is that what drives everything about Talmud, about Mishnah in particular, and then Gemara as a secondary type thing, is a fear of a loss of memory, a fear of a loss of memory. And so if you know that you've got a burning house and you've got to get out of there as fast as you can, what are you taking with you? Right, exactly. You're taking your photographs. And if you're right, exactly. You're taking the things that are you're not taking your jewelry. You're not taking your history books. If you're running out of if you're a lawyer, or if you're a judge, or if you're at the Library of Congress, what are you taking with you? And so from the rabbinic point of view, you're taking anything that can help future generations. And you know that you're saving this for everybody in the future. You're going to take everything that can help you connect halakha, Jewish life, to what they see as Jewish life, back to a reasoned understanding of how it connects to Torah, how it connects to what was divine and what was God-given. You're trying to take anything that can prove and can show that halakha and the practice of halakha is tied to that original divine revelation by God to Moses and to the Jewish people. And so how does that work itself out? It works itself out in many different ways that we're going to see, but that's essentially your goal. And that's essentially the goal of everything that the rabbis say. So that when people ask, I don't really like reading rabbinic literature, they'll say, I'm a woman and I don't see myself in rabbinic literature, or my background is particular to me and I don't see myself reflected in rabbinic literature. Chazal's reaction to that would be, why should you be there? Who is there? Who's in rabbinic literature? Rabbinic literature is saved by rabbis for future rabbis, for future people who will be making decisions. Just like if you go into a law library, which I did for a summer, I interned at a law firm in New York City, and had to do legal research before it was like LexisNexis cost like $1,000 a minute or something. So they actually would send poor people like me to actually go through books and try to find precedents and legal precedents and information from all of these books. So I never saw myself in those books. Those books were so clearly written not for someone like me. They were written for judges and lawyers and barristers and solicitors and whoever. It's a type of literature that's very, very focused on a particular type of person who's going to pick it up and read it. Just like, in this community, a whole pickleball conversation is starting. So if you've never played pickleball before, you have no idea what they're talking about, you can feel like, okay, this doesn't talk to me. It's not meant to. It's meant to talk to the people who understand what's going on. So that's something that I think we all have to understand, is that in many respects, when we go into rabbinic literature, we're going into a literature that was not written specifically for us. We're trying to insert ourselves into it to try to understand it and bring our understanding into it so that it can reflect back to us. But that wasn't why it was written, you know, as opposed to the Tanakh, which was written for everybody.
Like, why would a non-lawyer look at legal?
Because we have nothing else. We have nothing else. So first of all, as opposed to, you know, that boring summer I spent doing research and sorry for any lawyers who are here, doing legal research. What did I care, right? It was an internship. Whereas for us, the stakes are huge, right? For generations and generations of Jews, this was their connection, not just to their past, it's their connection to how they can feel that they're a part, that the past is not the past, it's a part of their present. And what does that do? It takes them to something that's timeless and divine and spiritual and layers of things that make it so that the stakes are very high, right? Like if I trespass according to U.S. law, if I trespass into someone's yard, and da 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 da. So okay, so I deal with it on a legal level, but how much do I have at stake? Whereas if I try to understand what is okay halachically to do, what is mutar, what is permitted to do on Shabbat, and I want to be part of a community where they have a different interpretation of what's okay to do on Shabbat. There are many layers of what's at stake, right? Because if I want to hang out with Toby on Shabbat, but we can't hang out because we're not interpreting things the same way, well, it's not just like, okay, you do you. It's much higher than that, right? Because there's a divine, spiritual, religious aspect to it where she could say, well, I don't agree with what you're doing, so I can't be a part of your social, you know, we can get together at Ramat Nadiv, but I can't eat at your house because there's too much at stake for me. This is something that means so much more to me.
What point did the masses start to delve into these things as opposed to just the leaders who can then transmit the information to their communities?
So that's a really good question. And it happened right now in terms of where we're going to start talking about it. So the rabbis, even though I'm giving you a picture of the rabbis as kind of separated and all of that, the Chazal were known and very well loved amongst the Amcha, amongst the masses. Why was that? Because on a political and social level, they were not part of the landed class. You know, the Kohanim were always supposed to be people without land, but the Sadducees became very wealthy and very part of the landed aristocracy. And the rabbis were not like that. The rabbis were people who held on to, you know, were part of the halachic discussion, but they bucked. They were always seen as bucking the aristocracy, and they were always seen as bucking also the Roman aristocracy. So they were of the masses. There were different rabbinical heads and yeshivot that tried to keep the masses out. And we have many stories from this time period, the students of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, where the doors of the Beit Midrash were open and they didn't have enough seats inside because it became so popular to come and to learn and to access this kind of learning, which makes a lot of sense because without a Beit HaMikdash, without a place where you could connect to God, this became the spiritual path. And that's why we're all part of Rabbinic Judaism. And that's why it matters to us as well. I'm just explaining why it's not such an easy road for us. In search of Chazal means that it's not clear cut. Nothing they say is ever clear cut. And we also have the other dilemma to work through, which is there's so many different kinds of rabbinic literature, right? There's legal, right? Just the legal cases that you've got in the Mishnah and that you've got in the Gemara. Then there's Midrash Halacha, which is just basically it's outside, it doesn't exist inside of the Talmud. These are other books called like the Mechilta and the Sifrei and all those, which basically, it's basically like what you would think of Midrash, except there's no good story or juicy story in it. It's just basically like, here's a pasuk, and here's how we understand it halachically. It's basically connecting every halakha to Torah, which is its own endeavor, which we can look at as well. And then there's Midrash. Midrash, we love that. We love Agadata. We love Midrash. Agadata is anything in the Talmud that has no obvious legal halachic purpose to the story. And those are the stories that we love. And those are the stories that we most often misinterpret. Because those are the ones where you have to scratch your head and you always have to think to yourself, why is this here? What possible purpose could there be to this? And then we also have Medrash, the Midrashim that exist outside of the Talmud, same idea. There's a story, no legal connection. What's the purpose for us? And this is where today you have so many different rabbis and teachers who are like, this is meant to, have such easy answers for what the point of the story is. And my message to you is, don't trust it. Keep digging and digging, because there is a purpose to it. I don't know if we ever get to the purpose to it, but you have to follow certain rules. You have to follow certain guidelines before you quickly say, this must be the purpose of this story. You have to try to get into the mindset, the rabbinic mindset, and understand literally what's going on to make someone say this. So that's what we're going to do today. So I just wanted to point out 3 books that I use as kind of inspiration, and I don't always, through the class, I won't always give it credit. So I just want to give it credit now. So Rabbi Lau's series, especially since it's in English, so it's much easier, on the sages, really, really fed into our first year, less so the second year, but will still be a guide for what we talk about this year. I mentioned this in the description, in the course description, Gila Fine, who I'm sure you know, because one thing you will learn, Sarah knows everyone, and if they're British, noch more. So it's like, so no, she's British. Oh, but this book is wonderful. It's The Mad Woman in the Rabbi's Attic, rereading the women of the Talmud. And I've taken a lot of her, she's really good at crystallizing. Oh, it's called The Mad Woman in the Rabbi's Attic, rereading the women of the Talmud, but I'll leave it here if you want to take a Gila, fine. Oh, sorry. And then this wonderful class after my first year gave me this book, Pirkei Avot. It's Adin Steinsaltz's commentary on Pirkei Avot. Now, why Pirkei Avot? Again, just to recenter us for people who are starting this year, we use Pirkei Avot. This class uses Pirkei Avot as a jumping board to answer the questions that I just posed to you in terms of who were the rabbis and what was their mindset, and what can we learn about their role politically, historically, and socially based on what they say. And Pirkei Avot turns out to be a wonderful place to do that. The inspiration for that comes from Rabbi Lau, and we will continue. So where we left off was we destroyed the temple, but before we get to really leaving the temple behind, I call this year the defining moment. And why I call it the defining moment is because everybody always thinks of the destruction of the temple itself, that pivotal point where Jews never went back to sacrifices. I mean, some people want to go back, in Shiloh, all sorts of things are happening, I heard, about that. But for most people, we're probably not going back. That's another story. But at that moment, every Jew had to make a decision how they were going to survive. Were they going to survive? First of all, there was a decision not to survive. With the destruction of the temple, there was a huge amount of suicide and depression, and Jews who survived, a lot of them were taken into slavery. So we've got a whole context, a whole Roman context we're not going to exactly address here. But if they made a decision to survive, how were they going to choose to survive? Were they going to hold on to a Jewish life that no longer focused on the temple, or were they going to redefine what their Jewish life was? And that was the decision that everybody had to make. So many people see that destruction as the defining moment. I see that whole period from the day after the destruction through Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi through the editing of the Mishnah as the defining moment. That was a period of time of 130 years as really the defining moment for us. Okay, so that's why I call this year the defining moment. It's not just about the destruction, it's about the day after the destruction. So we're starting in year 70. Okay, so we're going to start with Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, and that's where we left off. Some of you have been here. We kind of went through some of these sources here and there before, so we're just going to review it a little bit, but we didn't actually go through this Mishnah. Okay, so Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai. I'm sure many of you have heard of him. We're going to talk about a famous story having to do with him, but I first want to put him into some sort of historical context. First, let's look at what he said. The first Mishnah in Pirkei Avot that talks about what he says introduces his students. One of the reasons why Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, oh, thank you for noticing. One of the reasons why Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai was so well known, we're going to learn about him today and in the next class also, is because he had so many pivotal students that you have all heard of. So Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanus, you know, the famous Achnai story, Rabbi Yeshua ben Hanania, who says Lo b'shamayim he. I'm trying to think of other really famous ones. Those are the two that come to mind. He was a colleague of Rabban Gamliel. Rabban Gamliel came from the prestigious family, and at the time of Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, even though he's called Rabban, he was not head of the Sanhedrin. It was Rabban Gamliel's family that continued to be head of the Sanhedrin. Rabban Gamliel, who was directly related to Hillel Hazaken. Okay, so that's Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai kibel mihillel umishamai. Okay, so Pirkei Avot is already making a historical decision here. It's trying to say that we have a direct line between Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai and Hillel and Shammai. Now, it is true that Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai learned from the school of Hillel, both Hillel and Shammai, which made him unique. He wasn't just like Rabban Gamliel was just a Hillelite. He was not part of the Shammai force. And one thing to realize at this time period, it can never be gainsaid how important both schools of thought were at this time. We always think about Hillel because Hillel won out at the end. The entire Shammai voice was completely shut down at some point, okay, during this time period. But at the time of the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, both were equally prominent, okay? And that's an important thing to know about the people who are going to be defining rabbinic literature. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai was one of those people. He was not. What? That's a good question. Shmai and Avtalion came before them. They also were not called Rabbi and Rabban and all of that. It could be Rabban became the way. It's a later term because if you look at the original Zugot, they're called Rabbi, not Rabban. I would venture to say that the family of Gamliel, like the early Rabban Gamliel and his grandson, the Rabban Gamliel from this period of time, and then his grandson was also Rabban Gamliel. I think they liked it. I think it designated them as like the way like Ovadia Yosef would wear like a turban. It's like, hey, I'm the Nasi. And they were heads of the Sanhedrin. But it's a later term. So not all the Zugot had that. And neither did Hillel and Shammai. Probably cooler to go without it. He used to say, Im lamadata Torah harbeh sorry to see, al taxik tova la'atzmecha ki lechach notzarta. Okay, which is a very nice idea. If you have learned a lot of Torah, don't claim credit for yourself because for such a purpose you were created. This is the whole point of why you were created. Now, this is a very nice statement because I haven't quoted the whole Mishnah here. If you go home and you look at this Mishnah, Perek Bet, Mishnah Chet, or 2:8, you'll see that he then goes on to introduce his students. So as someone who's about to introduce his students, it's nice to take a kind of little bit of an immodest look and say, really, these are people who have learned a great amount of Torah, but this is the point. This is their tafkid. Now, it all sounds great, except for the fact that there's a manuscript error. And there are two versions of this Mishnah. I've given you the version that's in Sefaria. and it's the version that almost everybody quotes. But according to Safrai, Professor Safrai of Bar Ilan, who what's it called? His series of books, Eretz, what? Torah to Eretz Yisrael. Who said that? Yes, thank you. Exactly. Thank you. Torah to Eretz Yisrael, which is like a 40-volume book that digs into the sources of the Mishnah and a historical academic perspective. According to Safrai, this is actually supposed to say, Im asita Torah harbe. If you've done, or if you've accomplished a lot of Torah, which means something very different. What does that mean? When you say asita, and when you say what? Practice. Exactly. It's referring to mitzvot. It's referring to mitzvot, not to learning. And so according to the prevalent, what Safrai says should be the actual understanding of this, it's not learning at all. And so getting back to Yael's question, how so? Right. Well, more than yes. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. It's a get right. Action requires learning. So the understanding, but getting back to Yael's question, from before, though, Yael said how, like, if these books seem to be only written for rabbis, how do we deal with public access to it? And so here we have someone who had probably the largest following of students at that moment. Okay. And he had all the star students, but what is he saying? If we look at what the manuscript should be saying. And what? Don't pat yourself on the back, but also it's a statement to, even though, but also even more so, when is he writing this? When is it being written? It's the end of the period of the Beit HaMikdash. So now the actions don't become korbanot. What do they become? They become mitzvot. Okay, it's a transition from korbanot to mitzvot, and how important and prevalent the mitzvot are.
But the korbanot one is
right.
But they're saying to make it sense. So like reframe.
More than anything, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is saying you can survive. We can survive without a Beit HaMikdash. And you don't need to be part of the intelligentsia. You don't need to be a student in my Beit Midrash. You just need to do the mitzvot. That's how you survive as a Jew. That's for the only purpose for what everyone, you could be someone who's incredibly learned, or you can be someone who is illiterate, which was more common at the time. And yet you both are created for the same purpose, which is to do the mitzvot. That's yes. Yes. So if we want to get into the tefillah discussion, that's going to be a different course, because my argument would be that Ezra, more than Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, actually, we can talk about Ezra. Ezra, who comes 500 years earlier, sets the stage for tefillah as opposed to korbanot, for prayer as opposed to sacrifices. So I want to just say one thing about that, though. Yes, but Sarah wants to say.
Difference between chassidut and itayut.
Mm-hmm. Explain.
Chassidut is doing the mitzvah. Whether you learned it or whether you know it or whatever, it's just do it. Don't think about it too much. And Lithuanians, you've got to know what you're doing or what you're not doing, but you've got to know.
Right.
You've got to have learned.
The men did, not the women.
Sorry?
The men did, not the women.
The men, not the women. The women, yeah, quite right.
Well, we had Seno and different things that emerged out of that tradition, but definitely, for a time period where people, whether they were men or women, were looking for something more, that's known academically as meta halakha, right? Everybody agreed. Like, there's nobody who would disagree with this statement. No rabbi who would disagree with this statement. The question was, what gets you up in the morning? Okay, if what gets you up in the morning is mitzvot, great, go for it. But if you're looking for something more, is it learning, like the litvakim? Is it spirituality, like the Hasidim? Is it philosophy, like Rambam? Is it Kabbalah? Like, that's your meta halakha. That's what keeps you going. And it could be that this is all. That's great. That's what his point is. No judgment. It's for that purpose that you're created. And then pickleball, right? Okay, so now we get a sense of who he is, and we're going to get more into who he was because he was really fascinating. But I want to just look at something that on the face of it does not include anything about him. Okay, we have, like I said in the beginning, the rabbis did not consider themselves historians. It was not why they woke up in the morning. It was not why they wrote what they wrote. Okay, why they recorded what they recorded. And yet we have little points where we seem to get some history. And the question is, can we trust it as history, or what was the purpose of it? In Gittin, which is the tractate that deals with get, which deals with divorce, the irony is that in Gittin, there are many, many dapim, there are many pages of Talmud that focus on the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. And so people like to say it's because there's a divorce between God and Bnei Israel going on, and da 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 da. But there's a cycle of stories, okay? And some of them repeat themselves as well. Okay, we're not going to spend a long time on this story, but I think it's important to set the stage. So this is the famous Kamsa Bar Kamsa story. Many of you have heard of that, right? And we could spend a long time on it, but we're not going to. We're just going to go through it, but I want you to notice some of the literary aspects of the story. And in this class, we've already gone through, the story is retold 3 times. And so in this class last year, we looked at all 3 of the versions so we could pick apart the differences. We're only going to look at the Gittin version. The reason we're only going to look at the version from Gittin is because the 3 passages that come right afterwards are about Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai. Okay, he's not in this story as far as we know. He might be. And the reason why he might be is because why did the Talmud decide to put such an emphasis on him afterwards? So we're going to try to pick that out. So a Kamsa u Bar Kamsa, Charuv Yerushalayim. Because of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, Jerusalem was destroyed, okay? Which is in many ways an ironic thing to say, right? Like, and you'll see at the end of the story. Clearly, Jerusalem was not destroyed because of someone named Kamsa and someone named Bar Kamsa. Clearly, that's not true. We could, yes, exactly. We could say a lot of things about it, but do the rabbis really think this is what happened? I mean, we know that's not what happened. We know that the Jewish leadership became splintered. There were the Sikarim, the zealots who wanted to fight the Romans no matter what. And then there was the landed class who said, no, we have too much to lose. Let's appease the Romans. And then were the people within Jerusalem who said, hey guys, we have enough food and drink and everything to live here for years and years and years. Let's just let time pass and let everything quiet down. And then there were the more zealots who came and burned down all the stores of food. And then everybody died in the siege and the temple was destroyed. So obviously it had nothing to do with a guy named Kamsa and a guy named Bar Kamsa. And in fact, it had nothing to do with a guy named Kamsa, as you will see. So at least according to the story. Dehahu Gavra, you'll see in a moment. Well, keep in mind your question. Let's try to figure it out. So Dehahu Gavra Derachme Kamsa Ubal Debabe Bar Kamsa. There was a guy, and this is really, if the Talmud really wanted to be truthful, it would have said the temple was destroyed because of this guy, right? Who we never know his name. He's just called Gever. He's just a guy, which is a very interesting point. So some Plony, some anonymous person, he had he was really good friends with Kamsa, and he hated Bar Kamsa. Aved Seudata Amar le Lishmai le Shamay Zil Iti li Kamsa Azal Iti le Bar Kamsa. He was having a party, which is strange. Okay, we're in the eve of the destruction of the temple. I mean, I know that we can relate to this, right? Because we're living in a time when there are hostages and wars going on, but you do what you do to get by, right? But I also would argue that this is not just a Stam party, okay? And we'll get to that at the end. So he's having a party, but from the rabbi's point of view, they may be passing judgment here too. He tells his party coordinator, go and get me Kamsa to invite to the party. And instead, his party coordinator makes a major faux pas and gets Bar Kamsa, and Bar Kamsa is his enemy. Ata ashkete dahava yati. So this guy, anonymous guy, comes to his own party, comes inside, he's really excited. And it's like Haman, when his face falls when he sees Mordechai. All of a sudden, he sees Bar Kamsa sitting there enjoying himself at his party. And he's really upset. And he says to him, Amarle, mi kadeh hahu gara ba baba Dahahu Gavra Humai Dahahu Gavra Humai who Dahu Gavra who are you my enemy? Like, he asks him rhetorically, what is this possible that you're sitting here and you're my enemy? My bite hacha. Kum pok. What are you doing here? Get out. Stand up and leave. Get out. Amarle, hoil va'ate shvekin ve'yahavne lach demei mad achina v'shatina. He says, you know what? I'm already sitting here. You can imagine how embarrassed he is. I'm already sitting here. Why don't I pay you? Just let me stay. I'll pay you for whatever I eat and drink. And Amarle la, no way. Amarle, yehevne lecha demei palga desudatech. Amarle la. Amarle yehevna lecha demei kule sudatech. Amarle la. Nakte beide okme ve'apke. Okay, so the guy says, I'll pay for half the party. No. I'll pay for all the party. No. And this Gavra, whose name we still don't know, physically lifts Bar Kamsa up and throws him out. Pay attention to the fact of how much action is going on, right? And a lot of action, like the Gavra wants to make a party. The Shammai brings the verbs, all the verbs being used. Very little sitting. The guy is sitting there, but he says to him, get up and go. And then he picks him up and throws him out. Okay. That is in contrast to the next paragraph. Amar, Bar Kamsa says to himself, Hoil v'havu yatve rabbanan v'lo macho. As opposed to all the action that's happening, right? The rabbis just, yatev, by the way, in the little trick in Aramaic, taf is the same as shin in Hebrew. So yatev means yoshev, basically. The rabbis were just sitting there and they didn't protest what was happening, okay? And there's this element of inaction, right, on the rabbi's part. We're going to skip because this next part is very exciting, but we're going to skip it for now. Bar Kamsa hatches a plan. What's his plan? He's going to, at that point, the Beit HaMikdash is still around, and the emperor, the Roman emperor, the Romans were, by the way, very ecumenical. They took over a lot of different countries that all had their own religions and their own cultures. And the Romans were like, hey, you know what? Let's hedge our bets. And they would offer sacrifices and be a part of every cult and every religion that's going on. And so, let's say they took over Syria, and in Syria they said, we worship the god, Jupiter, whatever it is, even though that's a Roman god. Hey, no problem. We'll give sacrifices to you. You'll give them on our behalf. They did that in the Beit HaMikdash. This was totally fine. It was totally accepted that the non-Jewish emperor would, on behalf of the non-Jewish emperor, the Kohen Gadol would offer sacrifices. We know this is true on Sukkot, right? On Sukkot, for even in the first Beit HaMikdash, the Kohen would offer sacrifices for the entire known world, for all the emperors and all the different countries. So this happened with the Romans too. No big deal. Bar Kamsa says to the emperor, he says, by the way, these Jews, they want to rebel against you. And the emperor is, unconvinced and says, why do you think that? That's not true. Bar Kamsa says, try to send a sacrifice, see what happens. And while the sacrifice is being brought to the temple, Bar Kamsa makes a tiny little mum, a tiny little blemish. There's a whole discussion about what this blemish is, because the blemish he makes is one that would disqualify it for Jewish sacrifice, but not for Roman sacrifice. And there are some rabbis who say, even for Jewish sacrifice, this particular mum would have been okay. It's inconsequential. That's the point. Let's go to the next source. Azal Shadar Bede, Okay, so they get to the temple. Now I'm on the second paragraph of the second source. What are they supposed to do? The rabbis are sitting there with this sacrifice, and the Kohen Gadol is waiting to sacrifice it, waiting to see what the rabbis say. Savu Rabbanan Lakrove. The rabbis thought to themselves, let's just sacrifice it. Mishum Shalom Malchut, for Shalom Bayit, basically, so that we don't get into a war. Now, something that you'll see more and more, the word savor, like we have that word in modern Hebrew, right? I'm not sure, but like savir lanya, exactly, reasonable. So savor means reasonable or thinking. When it's used, yes, svara is a conclusion. When it's used in the Gemara in this way, it's usually a straw man. It's usually presenting an idea. We just had it at Daf Yomi. It's usually presenting an idea that will then get knocked down. A svara is a svara, which means it should mean a reasonable argument, never is accepted. Most times is not accepted. So savor is already kind of very passive. It's like the rabbis are just kind of sitting there and they're like, sacrifice it, let's just sacrifice it. Shalom malchut, okay? And there's one guy, this Rabbi Zachariah ben Avkulus, who says, Yomru bale moving kraving legabe mizbeach. If we sacrifice it, everyone's going to think they can bring a blemished sacrifice to the temple. So we can't sacrifice it. This is one guy. We don't know who he is. And there's presumably many rabbis sitting around. And even though they all want to just sacrifice it, they let this one guy convince him. Savor limiktale delal lazil velema. So then the rabbis have another straw man idea. They say, hey, let's kill him. Let's kill him so that he can't go and tell on us to the emperor. Now that seems kind of extreme, right? It's not so extreme. Right, it's killing the shaliach. Or Bar Kokhba, whoever. It's not so extreme if you think, which it seems that the rabbis understand that they're in trouble. It seems that the rabbis understand that this isn't such an easy situation because this is the emperor's sacrifice they're dealing with. And the political situation is not very good, right? So they're not dummies. They understand what's going on. To kill either Bar Kokhba or the shaliach is not in that instance would be halachically okay, right? Because either Bar Kokhba or the shaliach, I think it's Bar Kokhba in this case, is a rodef. He is planning to do something very sinister that could cause destruction upon the Jewish people. So in fact, rabbinically and Doraita, and according to biblical law, they could have killed him. They could have stopped the story right there and said, you're no good. You're undermining the Jewish people. You're going to bring upon us destruction. And they could have taken him to a court and actually killed him. Okay. Let's not go that far. Okay. But that was the argument actually given at the time. Okay. Okay. And then what does Rabbi Zachariah say? He says, Yomru metil mum bekodashim yarek. So he says, no, you can't kill him because otherwise people will say, if you bring a sacrifice that has a blemish, you'll get killed. Okay. Obviously that wouldn't have happened though, right? That wouldn't have happened. That's not why they would have killed him. Okay. So Amar Lahu, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. This is not Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. This is a Rabbi Yochanan that's quoted in the Gemara. He's one of the Amoraim later. He says, Ivnatu nuto shel Rabbi Zachariah ben Avkulus hechriva et beitenu v'sarfu et hechalenu v'higiletanu me'artzenu. It's because of Rabbi Zachariah ben Avkulus. It's because of him being such a nudnik that everything was destroyed. He is the reason why Jerusalem was destroyed. He's the reason why the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, and he's the reason why we were expelled from Eretz Yisrael. Now, do the rabbis really think this is all because of Zvulun ben Avkulus? Do they really think that the whole thing happened because of the story of Bar Kokhba and Kamsa? So today, when we read the story, we say what Shira said, is that it shows that we weren't unified. It shows that there was a splintering of ideas. But I think that it goes even further because remember, this is the rabbis saying this. And one of the points that Gila Fine makes in her book, which I think is really a good point, is she's saying, as she says, that when it comes to these stories, I said in the beginning, this is rabbinic literature. We don't know what to make of it, right? Is this meant to teach us a story? Is this meant to teach us a lesson? Are we supposed to understand from this some global idea? She says, actually, the purpose of these kinds of stories is for the rabbis to critique themselves. These are opportunities for the rabbis to test themselves outside of the straight on halachic realm. And the reason she says this is that she says, if you look at the context of this particular story, it comes in an argument about what happens the daf before the story, the page before the story, is a machloket. It's a debate or an argument about what kind of mum is allowed in a sacrifice, what kind of blemish is allowed in a sacrifice. And so here are the rabbis taking a step back and saying, listen, we can argue from today till tomorrow, but sometimes there are things that are more important than the actual blemish, that are more important than the actual thing that we're arguing about. And what is more important in this story? The fact that the only people that did not act in this story were the rabbis. They were the only ones who did not act. In fact, we see it in that verb, the passive verb. Bar Kamsa, the Gavra, who we don't know who he is, he's acting the whole time. He's doing this whole thing. Kamsa is the only one who doesn't act either. We never hear from him. Bar Kamsa is acting. As soon as he's insulted, he acts. He does this incredible thing. And the rabbis try to muster the strength to make a decision, and they end up making a non-decision. They end up just sitting back and saying, they sit at the party, they don't react at the party, and then they sit here and they don't react here. Now, if we look at the cycle of stories, this story is told, then there's a story about Marta. We're not going to get into it. It's also an interesting story. But then there are 3 stories about Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. And do we have a couple more minutes so we can get to the bottom of those 3 stories? I know, I think we started 5 minutes late, so I'm taking 5 more minutes. So I only took the last part of the last story. But Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai he's probably at the party. Most likely, if we want to look historically, most likely this party was not a stam, barbecue. Most likely, we know that Kamsa and Bar Kamsa are both referred to. No, sorry, it's Kamsa. Kamsa is referred to by Josephus. Okay, Kamsa is called Kamsus in the book of Josephus, and according to the book of Josephus, not the book of Josephus, according to his history, according to Josephus, Kamsus was someone who did not believe in fighting he believed in fighting the Romans. Okay, and so there is evidence that this party was not just a party; it was a strategy. It was a time to get leaders of the community together and strategize about what their next steps are. When the guy who's hosting the party sees Bar Kamsa, as you can tell, was very well connected to the Roman. He was Jewish, but very well connected to the leadership. He obviously believed in appeasing the Romans and saying, let's see how long we can just continue to live with the Romans. So he was very happy to just say, throw the Jews under the bus. The Romans are clearly going to win. So let's work with the Romans. When the guy who's having the party sees Bar Kamsa come in, that's the reason he can't keep him there. He can't be a part of this discussion. But this proves our point even more. Where are the rabbis? The rabbis never give. As we saw over all of those hundreds of years that we went through in the first 2 years, the rabbis are like, does anybody know the Blackadder series in the UK, right? There's a few different series, right? And in the first one, Blackadder, played by Rowan Atkinson, is very, very close to the king. And the second one, it's Queen Elizabeth, and Blackadder now is here. He's a what do you call it, like a knight or someone, right? And then in the third series, he's nothing. He's like a peasant. In the fourth series, the king is here, and he's a mifaked in World War I. Okay, so it's like that. if you take that Blackadder series, you can map it onto the rabbis. When Ezra comes back with the Jews from Babylonia to build the second temple, he's very close to the Persian leadership, right? Then you have the Hasmoneans, you have the Hashmonaim and the Maccabees. The rabbis are still very close to the leadership. As the Hashmonaim, as Jewish leadership becomes closer and closer to the Romans, and then finally so weak that the Romans take over, the rabbis sit back more and more and become more passive to the political situation. I don't know why. It could be that they feel, well, we know that Aristobulus killed a few hundred rabbis, so they're also scared, but they refuse to take they refuse to get involved politically, and they start to say negative things about politics. Stick to the Beit Midrash, don't fight, don't leave, just stick to the Beit Midrash, okay? I know. Exactly. So that's when they become Prushim. They become more and more separate from what's going on. So that's my Blackadder analogy. So clearly here, though, the rabbis who come much later, who come a few hundred years later, are writing the story, and they're putting their own spin on it. So the story may have happened, but the later rabbis are saying, Rabbi Yochanan, who is in Amora, is saying, these guys made a mistake. These guys caused the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. You have to get involved. You have to make a statement. And so what is the next story that the Gemara tells about Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai? It turns out that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai's nephew was head of the Zealots. His sister's son was head of the Zealots. He all of a sudden gets up, it uses the verb, he gets up and he says to his nephew, you've got to stop. Something went terribly wrong. You have to stop these zealots. We have to find an alternative. Yeah, it's okay. We have to find an alternative. And what does his nephew say to him? It's too late. If I say that, they will kill me. This is already a movement that's gone way beyond me. So what does Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai do? He gets his students, Rabban Gamliel, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus, Rabbi Yoshua, and he gets them to sneak him out of Jerusalem. Is that Nazakah here? Herzliya. I didn't get it though. It's not in Zichron. Let's continue. I'm not going to be a friar again. I keep going into the Ramah. Listen. Okay, so maybe we should stop here. We can stop here. So, you wanted to hear what happens? So stay tuned. In 2 weeks, we'll find out what happens. Oh, you want to stay? Oh no, so she was standing up. So I thought, okay, should we stay? Should we go? Okay. Okay, what? Oh, you heard the boom. Limud Torah Keneged Kulam, guys. I will protect. Is that us?
They're just happy that Trump's Trump winning.
I think we should stop. We should stop. Okay, we're gonna stop here. Okay, because the booms are coming. Okay. Are you registered?